We tend to relate to, well, nearly everything from a very personal perspective. Even when we get into spirituality, it can still be framed in a very personal way. We often hear people say, "Well, I just um, want to find a little more peace. I just want to quiet my mind. I just want to feel comfortable in myself or in this world or being in my own skin." Can be framed in a very practical way in that sense, but also a very personal way. That I want my experience to be as I would like it to be. Right? I want to feel happy, natural, right? Frame it in more exalted terms, like I want to experience unity with the divine. I want to know God. I want to get enlightened. I, I imagine I'll feel better when I do. Right? So even I'm not saying that there might not be true deep learning, longing also happening, but there also can be this very personal, um, you know, self uh, desire for um, improving my experience in this lifetime. So we can imagine that enlightenment will do that. If I got enlightened at some future point, of course, that I will feel good about myself and other people and life, and it'll be wonderful. I'll feel good. So there can still be, even though these can be exalted goals framed in those terms, there can be still some self-interest involved. Right? Or just as an example of how um, much we value, um, this life, our experience of it. In almost all circumstances, we will do whatever is required to continue this life, right? There's very few circumstances in general where people will actually choose to sacrifice their own existence um, for somebody else. Maybe to save a child in a dire emergency. Um, Maybe in wartime when you choose to, in a way, to save your buddy. Right? I mean, we can, very very few times in this lifetime that we're called on to make those kinds of choices, and are willing to give up our own existence. So that's how highly we value this personal existence. So it's natural that we want to improve that experience. So we shouldn't. What we're talking about here is not denying anything. Not saying that we shouldn't want to feel happy or at peace, or it's not. It's not really that at all. It's the tendency to take whatever happens in a very personal way, right? That that added element of taking it whatever happens, taking it personally, um, either in a hurtful way or prideful way, or a grabbing kind of way, or a pushing away, or any way that we're adding to that the actual experience by imposing an overlay of blame or shouldn't, or envy or judgment or fear or greed, or all of those kinds of very personal psychological add-ons to what's actually happening. So we can see that and just acknowledge it, acknowledge the power of that movement, just that desire to sustain this, what we take ourselves to be, this, this body mind structure. And, we want to do whatever we can in its best interest, right? So even if we're, let's say, serving others and um, you know, doing what we feel is right and beneficial out in the world, even then we can sometimes see that there can still be this self-interest in that, I feel good when I'm, serving others. It makes me feel good. There's a payoff there. Maybe there's some respect, maybe community acknowledgement. There can be an element of that. And it's not that that doesn't happen, but if there's a motivation tied into that, even to some lesser degree, it we can still acknowledge that there's some self-interest there. And we could go even further, and let's say we're find ourselves in a situation where we're caring for, let's say, a relative or a sibling that is in maybe medical need, and maybe we don't even like this person, but we feel obligated to take care of them. And but we can see that even then there might be some self-interest in feeling like, well, at least I can take some comfort in being the responsible person, being the helper, right? Being the caregiver, being the adult in the room. It can get more and more and more subtle, and none of this is wrong, right? We're not talking about rightness and wrongness here. It's just being, more and more aware of when there's an element, not even a majority element, but even an element um, of self-interest, doing it to improve my experience of myself, my feelings about myself, relating to myself in this very personal way. So we can just acknowledge that there's this strong tendency, and where does that come from? Huh? It's the power of that. Where does it come from? And I'd suggest where it comes from is in how we identify ourselves by all the different categories, the things that we've done, and accomplishments, etc. But just what we take ourselves to be. And in this culture, what we have all been taught is that what you are is this um, body-mind combination, right? The body and sort of its charioteer, the mind, sort of directing things and trying to get the body to go where it wants it to go. And there's evidence for that, right? We can look down and say, "Yep, there it is. There's the body," and I can feel into it from the inside. Yes, these are my fingers and my thoughts. It all feels very personal. So it's a convincing concept. We don't even call it a concept because it's just what we take ourselves to be. Of course, this is what I am. We can see that this finger, the fingers on my hand, are personal. They're personal to this body and not to yours. The thoughts that are appearing in this head are personal to this experience and not to yours. You have your own thoughts. Right? So from that paradigm, this body feels personal. It's our direct experience of it. And these thoughts are personal, these feelings are personal. So the only question is that the end of the story? Is that all there is? If that's all there is, then it is the most natural thing in the world to take things personally, because that's where it lands. If that's what we believe that we are, that's where it lands. Good things, the difficult things, the mundane things land here, and we've all become quite good at sort of assessing, like what's to my advantage and what's to my disadvantage, and what am I just bored with. So, but it's all of that is personal, right? So it's easy to conclude that yeah, I am separate from the world. You know, this is this body, and there are all those other bodies out there, and they're separate from this body. So this sense of separation from others, from the world, from the perspective of this body mind structure is, well, obvious. And it's it's further supported by the fact that everybody believes it. Right? They even believe that what is conscious and aware is a product of this separate self. Even though consciousness or awareness has no form to it, formless, and it doesn't have a shape or size or color, or doesn't seem to be limited spatially, particularly, doesn't seem to age or have a gender, allows everything to be as it is. It's already quiet and at peace. But we somehow have been taught that that is a product of this physical manifestation. So when we get into spirituality and hear about things like unity with the divine, or oneness, the question naturally comes up, well, how can me as this separate self realize or attain oneness with all things? Right? That's the challenge. That's the impossible challenge. That's the challenge that we'll never succeed at. We'll never succeed at this separate personal self attaining oneness. Right? Why? Because the assumption, we start off with a faulty assumption, namely that to start with, I am this separate self, and my task is for this separate self to discover oneness. But that will never happen. It won't happen because oneness is what remains as the obvious fact when we recognize that this, what we take ourselves to be as this separate, very personal self, is belief, mistaken belief in our identity. So when we hear about um, the possibility of oneness, being at ease in the world and in ourselves, um, feel the warm embrace of the divine, we like that. We like that, and we're willing to give. Imagine that we'll give up, our our own our conditioning. We're happy to give up all that dysfunctional conditioning as long as we can still be identified with me. So as long as I don't lose that, I'm willing to give up everything else, but I'm going to hold on to this sense of this personal self. But it's exactly that sense, that belief in a separate personal self that holds us apart. Otherwise, there's no separation. There, there's actually no separation at all, except in our own mind, founded on the belief that there is. Right? So we can feel these two movements like, I want to let go, but it's not. I don't want to let go of this identity, this sense of me. And it comes back to what we were talking about before, where we so highly value the perpetuation of our existence that the idea of giving up what we believe ourselves to be is frightening. Right? It's the psychic equivalent of, it feels like, of throwing ourselves on the grenade, our own extinction. The idea that, you know, that our very identity is at risk. So as we investigate more and more deeply, we can feel the sort of ill-fitting constraints of our conditioning and habits and limitations and mental confusion and judgmentalism and unworthiness and all of that. Um, but we, we're willing to let that go if we can figure out how to do that. But we're not at all sure about letting go of the very identity of what we are. But it's the our, the very identity of what we take ourselves to be that holds that whole structure in place. Even if there's the same conditioning, same thought patterns, if the what we take ourselves to be is the recognition of something beyond this body mind, then the conditioning is just not that significant. It still may function. It won't have that sticky sense to it. It's almost, it's more like looking at someone else's conditioning. It may not be that pleasant to be around, but it feels a bit distant. It's not, doesn't feel like it's yours. So what? Um, so this is the possibility of considering that our true identity might not be limited to this body mind, and the only possibility that we all have direct experience with is this innate capacity of consciousness, right? Not even elevated consciousness, just plain old ordinary everyday consciousness. Uh, That capacity to be present for and aware of whatever's happening. And that sense is of a different nature than the form of this body mind. So what causes us to be so convinced that um, this consciousness emanates from the body mind rather than being that which enlivens this body mind, energizes it, um, which is this um, the ultimate source of our entire experience. What causes us to believe that no, this is I'm quite sure, you know, in addition to being taught this, I'm also quite sure um, because why? And I'd suggest that because we identify ourselves with this body, we can feel it, we can look at it, we can touch it, and think, therefore that consciousness must be personal, but it's not. This consciousness is not personal to this body. If it were personal to this body, how exactly is the consciousness here in any way different than the consciousness there or anywhere else? It has no shape or size or age or gender or history or how can it be different? Where does one consciousness end and the other begin if they're both identical? Not only identical, but undifferentiated in any way. And the only way we can insist that it is personal to us is, yeah, but my experience is in this body. Yes, of course. That's how we get to experience the world, is having consciousness, um, presence of consciousness functioning through this form as this form. And of course, that's what this body mind is good at. Is it's what it's required for, is to experience the world of form around it as a sensing organism. So it feels personal because that's where the sensing organism is looking from. Right? It's looking out of these eyes, but what's looking out of those eyes is awareness, and awareness is looking out of your eyes. But from that perspective, through your body mind, it looks different. Different fingers, different thoughts, different view, different room, different chair. Same awareness. So this awareness itself is not personal. Intimate, in no way separate, but not personal. Couldn't be closer. Or essential nature. And we can learn to function from that deeper intelligence by getting out of the way. By getting out of the way, I just mean not relating from such a personal perspective. Not the experience is the experience that each body mind has at every moment. But what I'm talking about is the overlay that we place on that by insisting um, on what I want. So we can just relax that and allow life to take the lead. We still, are required to function in the world, to get up in the morning, and will still act and do things, and in fact, we'll be able to do that much more harmoniously because it wouldn't be coming from such a personal place. And we can learn to be in the world in that way. It can be a little strange for a while, but um, it's that's that sense of being in the world without fear, because there is a recognition that what we are is not ultimately of this world of form. It's what the world of form happens within. It's within the formless, happens within awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call that, spirit, the divine, whatever word you like. And it all unfolds within that.